Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. This is Joe Saponare of CyMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigmont of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. Hey everybody, it's our 9th anniversary. That's right, we've been recording Command Control Power every week since June 2013. We hope you've enjoyed it. On this special occasion of 9 years running, we're trying a little experiment for the next month or 2. We have a great community of supporters on Patreon, and we really want to show them how much we appreciate their support. So this summer, we're airing new shows every week in the private patron-only subscription. Here on the public show, we'll re-air a classic episode from our catalog of almost 500 episodes, along with the occasional new show. For the freshest content, a peek behind the scenes, and more candid conversation about running our businesses, dealing with clients, fixing tough technical issues, and everything else you love about Command Control Power, we invite you to join us on Patreon so you don't miss any of this great content. Go to commandcontrolpower.com and click support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the weekly patron-only shows right in your favorite podcast app. This week we have a very special feature. We're doing what's called a residential roundtable, and we have 3 very special guests to discuss the topic of consulting for residential clients, for home users. First, I'll welcome Adam Rice. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
We also have Andy Espo of Call Andy Macintosh Consulting. Andy, thanks for being here.
Glad to be anywhere.
And from across the pond, we have Ramy Kramers of Super Ramy. Ramy, it's late for you. Thanks especially for joining us at this hour.
No problem. I love to listen to your show every week, and I'm happy to participate.
Awesome. So, Ramy, you are doing a topic very similar to this for the upcoming ACES conference, and that's how you got on my radar as a residential consultant focusing heavily in this area. What does that talk about that you're doing, the 3 R's?
Yeah, the 3 R's, recurring revenue from residential clients. I don't want to say everything that I'm going to say there, but I have made some kind of a recipe to help residential customers and get recurring revenue out of it. The recipe contains of 3 simple ingredients. First one is feel the pain of your customer. The second one is make a sandwich. And the third one is show and tell. So if you have these 3 ingredients, I think you could be getting recurring revenue from the residential clients.
Of course, the benefit of going to ACES is to see this in person. I'm sure you're going to get into a lot more detail, and then people can ask you questions afterwards.
Absolutely.
But we're very glad you're here to share, a little bit of a tease on Command Control Power. So, Andy, you've been doing this for quite a while, dealing with residential clients, consulting for residential clients. And I remember, learning that last year at ACES and sort of making a mental note and realizing, I wasn't exactly in bad company. I was one of the few people up until then I knew that sort of focused on residential clients. So what have you learned over the years that you can, share with listeners who want to maybe consider helping the home user?
Sure. I've been doing this for 19 years, the first 9 as a solo and since then with a team. And I think what sort of differentiated me at the outset was I didn't treat the residential clients and the business clients really differently. What I really tried to do was take the same tools, the same solutions that we would use for small work groups and bring them to families. And, most of the residential clients we work with are, higher net worth. Putting gig networks in 15 years ago and media servers, even using hosted, Curio, for instance, when it first became available with a custom family domain. This is before Gmail was around as pervasively as they are now. These were all the same solutions that we were rolling out for small business clients. So I think that it made a lot of the solutions that we were bringing to the high-end resi clients much more bulletproof and dependable. So especially being here in Boston, there are a lot of older, bigger homes, and they would say to us, well, we can't get Wi-Fi, how do we do this? And instead of giving them the Best Buy line of, we'll just go buy some extenders, which we were hearing a lot of our competitors doing, we were, bringing wiring companies in and specifying Cat 5e and Cat 6 now and setting them up for really great performance. And it's just sort of went from there.
So your services and hardware, you were able to sort of translate that from the business side to the home side, and obviously your clients benefited. Were there any other ways of rendering services or an attitude kind of approach that resulted in better success from the start with home users?
I remember saying something to someone a long time ago that a family is really just a small work group with 5-year-old. The one thing that is different is that oftentimes you're getting calls at different hours in a small business client or enterprise client, at 5, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, unless someone's traveling, you're probably not going to hear from them until the next morning. Whereas a residential client, you're much more likely to hear from them at night and on weekends. For me personally, it never was really a problem. I remember being on vacation somewhere at one point and just talking to this client, and he was saying, well, so it sounds like you're driving. Where are you? I said, in Hawaii. He said, well, why are you talking to me? Bill, the call that we just had is going to pay for what we're doing today. It was nice. Like I've never felt that it's never felt like an intrusion on me as long as the clients are respectful about the time.
That's a big qualifier, though, in some cases. I mean, it like you said, it all depends on what their perspective is. I mean, that client in particular was certainly very sympathetic to the fact that you were on vacation, and it sounds like probably appreciative that you were, willing to talk with him on that trip. And I've been doing that for years as well. And I think it's about your attitude. You don't mind taking those calls. It doesn't feel like an intrusion. The client doesn't necessarily know that they're intruding on you. And so, why interpret it that way? But on the other hand, if the client does come at you strong with the calls at 8:30 p.m., you're trying to just unwind from the day and they just need help now because the kids need to be able to print their homework or whatever. It's about their attitude too. When they come at you that way, expecting that you're just going to be at their beck and call and not really understanding that, you need time to not be working sometimes too, that can make it healthier or less healthy relationship.
I don't think that's a residential versus business scenario. I think training clients and managing clients' expectations and setting reasonable expectations is always what we always have to do. I mean, it's just part and parcel of what we do every day. If the 8-year-old can't print her homework at 10:30 on a Friday night, that may or may not be urgent. Sometimes there's that parsing of what urgent means, and urgent can be contextual and it can vary by client. Are you okay with it? Is it an okay time for you? I mean, if I'm just sitting around doing nothing, taking the call, well, that's fine. On the other hand, if I'm sitting in a movie and a client is hammering my cell phone or texting me, I'm going to have a different response to them, especially if what they're talking about, to me, doesn't really feel urgent.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's all degrees.
That's the difficulty, is setting that line of time. Like you said, like if you're not doing anything, you might pick up the call, but then are you setting an expectation? Hey, you can call me tomorrow night at this time or something. So setting those expectations is a difficulty sometimes for the clients to understand the difference of working hours versus when they just need you. You mentioned something that I think is also relevant to our area in Fairfield County, Connecticut. A lot of these residential clients, they're affluent clients, so they can be run almost like a small business with the costs that are associated with them they can handle. Adam, if you don't mind me throwing you in the mix here, how are your clients in this residential market? Are they clients that almost can afford things like small business level costs, or are they more smaller end residential clients where they just need like a time capsule setup or something like that?
It's funny. Yeah, it really runs the gamut. My client base early in my journey compared to some of the folks on this call, I've been doing this maybe close to 6 years now. Gone through, I think, a pretty typical consulting path. I decided what my target rate was going to be, how much I needed to charge per hour. And then I got out there and I was just kind of terrified to ask for that much money, Quickly found myself with a client base that wasn't looking to spend that much, but were happy to have me come and work for peanuts. But over the course of the last few years, making connections and getting referrals and figuring out, understanding my worth, it's really filled in at the upper end and right in the middle. Some clients, it's a nicer house than I'm ever going to live in. The networking there, the infrastructure is equivalent to any small office that I've supported and worked in. I was doing some networking and someone said something. I went to a meeting of professional organizers and this woman introduced herself in a way that stuck with me. She said, yeah, I work with high achieving families. And I was like, high achieving families. I think I want to work with high achieving families. I thought it was a great way to capture who these people are. And really nice about working with them is that they have very reasonable expectations. You meet them and they understand that you're a professional and that they want a professional job done. And so, you can have discussions about schedules and about frank discussions about costs. You don't have to hide. With at the other end of my client base, I found myself sort of pacing the conversation and just get them to understand that this Mac needs to be replaced sooner rather than later, but let's wait to broach that until I know that they're going to be able to restart and the machine is running well.
Remy, at the top of the show, we mentioned that you were actually in a different time zone. You're in the Netherlands right now. It's after midnight. But I want to hear more about your residential business. When you first started out being an Apple consultant, did you make a conscious focus on the residential market, or was it something where you just put the word out to businesses and residential and it just ended up being a residential primarily for you?
No, I started focusing on residential because I was working in an Apple reseller store. What I noticed that people asked me, "Can you come over to my home because I have some problem with this and this?" We couldn't because the Apple reseller wouldn't allow us to do stuff like that. And I told my boss that we had to do something with this and we had to make a business plan to help these customers at their homes. I actually made a business plan and showed it to my boss at that time, but he didn't believe there was a market for it or that anyone would pay anything to get help at home. That's when I said, okay, I'm going to leave and do it myself. That's about 4 years ago now.
Did you have a non-compete time period where you had to sit quiet, like a waiting period?
No, I actually have a very good relationship with all the guys that were working in the store. And they were happy to help me and give my business cards to customers. So that was a good start for me. And I really want to focus on residential clients. And that's mainly because I like to work with the end user. I want to be sitting next to the end user. What I always say is I sit side by side with the end user. They show me all their stuff. They show me their computer, their iPad, their iPhone. What I do is I ask them to do as if they are working. And I just look into what they are doing. And then I am going to improve their workflow. So that's the way I like to work. For a lot of consultants, it's more tempting to go to business because there's more money there. Yeah, I really like it this way, and I think the money is good as well. If your rates are on a certain level, you won't get these clients that are nagging all the time because they won't be even calling you because they will. If they see your rates, they will think like something like, okay, that's way above.
They self-select out.
That exactly. You have to have a good rate that is good for you, and that is reasonable for what the client gets. If that's all sorted out, then you should be able to have a good relationship with your clients, have them understand that your time is valuable as well.
So not to have you get specific about your rates, but percentage-wise, how much lower are your rates compared to like the typical business rate for a consultant in the Netherlands?
I think just slightly, actually. So okay. I think here in the Netherlands...
it's not a big concession.
No, I'm not that much. Well, there are some people that are having way higher rates, but most of them are just slightly more expensive. Yeah. So it's just about 10 euros.
And do you find that difference in economic strata that we talked about, where some people live in a very accessible house and then there's other people that you're servicing where you would call them a high-end customer? Do you see as much disparity as we do here in the United States?
Yeah, of course. I think it's similar. I do have a lot of customers that are living in great, huge houses, and they have a room for 10 cars if they would have them, and some of them do. So, but there are also customers with a little bit more normal household. I think the diversity is about the same.
And I guess this is a question to everybody. You guys aren't exclusively residential, but the bulk of your business is. But so you're still taking in a business client if they come to you.
Well, not ours. I mean, we are 50-50 actually. I mean, we have out of the 200 or 300 unique clients we see a year, probably 50% of them are residential.
And how about you, Adam?
Last year, I think I did something like 75% residential, sort of individual clients, and then, but it turns out to be closer to 50-50 revenue.
Well, that's interesting. Joe, are you finding those kind of numbers? That it ends up being 50?
Yeah, I haven't looked at it very closely recently, but yeah, it in the past it has been pretty similar. Majority residential by client count, but by revenue, like more like 50-50, because the businesses just need more help consistently, and they're larger in size.
Two things. Number one, I've always found the residential customers, especially the higher net worth residential customers, to be, there's much less rate resistance there than with a business customer. As the economic conditions vary, oftentimes it's the business customers that are far more sensitive, and the high-end residential customers, it doesn't really affect them in the same way. And they're used to hiring professional services, whether it's an architect or whatever profession they're used to hiring. For them to hire a computer consultant is just another professional service that they're bringing in, so they're very used to it. And the last thing I'll say about that is that when the economy went south back in, was it 2008, 2009, so many small businesses and even larger businesses adjusted and either killed their support, or they went on self-support, or they went out of business. So we found a huge adjustment down in our business clients, where our residential clients, they didn't even feel it. It didn't matter to them. We just kept going with them like normal, and they were essentially almost immune. And that market for us was immune from the economic downturn.
Yeah, I think you've just identified one of the main advantages in not discriminating against residential clients is that they just provide that level of diversity in your business model, in general. Because if business seems to get hit hard, by an economic downturn, maybe residential, is affected in a different way or not affected. And furthermore, if residential clients by definition fall into many different categories, they earn their living in many different ways. Yep. So that's just diversity in and of itself. So
you could have one vertical that was really hit hard by whether it's economy or technology. Like, think about the guys who were the consultants who were like Final Cut experts back in the day, and they were making a lot of money doing that. That market is gone. Being diverse, both in terms of the technologies that you service as well as the markets that you service, means that you're going to be much less impacted by whatever changes.
I also see the same thing, and residential customers don't have any budget. They are not on a budget. They just want you to fix the problem. And
or install the thing.
Yeah, exactly. And if you go to a business, you talk to a guy in the business that has a budget from his boss, his or her boss, and he has to stick to the budget. So there could be a point where they say, okay, this is going to be too expensive, and then they're going to have to talk to someone. And when you're with the residential customers, I never have these questions.
They might have to justify it to their significant other, but that's really
it. That's it. Yeah, exactly.
So I guess they're less cost conscious in that sense, broadly speaking, but in the like individual project based, circumstance, like if they say this isn't working, their next question isn't, and what is it going to cost to fix it? It's like, how soon can you fix it? And, what is it going to take? Yeah. Maybe down the road, they sometimes do ask, well, what's all this costing me or something like that. But usually you're kind of like under the engagement by that point.
And what I also see is that the best customers, in my opinion, are the ones that don't look at the money all the time. They just say like, okay, I want this problem fixed and I trust you. And what I truly believe is if they trust me, if they give me the trust that I won't screw them over, and I will just do right by them by fixing the problem without spending too much time on it, then if they give me their trust, I also don't take advantage of it. I just want to make sure it works, and I don't want to bill too much for it. So if I have been trying to fix something for half an hour and I haven't reached a point that I could fix it for them, I automatically don't bill that extra time, because I don't want to. Giving trust makes me not want to screw them over. And if a customer is from the beginning saying, okay, this is going to be expensive, and how can you make sure that you won't be working too late? That's a customer where I'm going to bill every minute.
Right. That's a really good point. I have the same policy. I find that when they take that leap of faith and we have that good, sort of rapport and that mutual respect and understanding, and they trust implicitly that we're not going to screw them over, I'm way more likely to extend them a discount proactively in good faith. And you're right, exactly right. It's the same thing in reverse. When they come to me and say, the last time you were here, and then it goes on from there, or
exactly.
Or this thing, that's a really interesting point, and I think that is unique in many ways to the residential market. I mean, would you go so far as to say you try and select for that type of client? I guess I'd throw this out to everybody, but for Remy in particular?
No, I don't actually refuse customers, but I did have to let go of some of my customers that were playing this game all the time. If I get the feeling that a customer is trying to push back, like, okay, this is too expensive, and then I fix it for them. And what I also notice, if someone is always trying to keep it cheap, then I'm going to not advise them the best solution. So I will advise them something, okay, you want to keep it cheap, so let's go for this one. But I also already know that the best solution is something else. In the end, I have to come over more because I have to fix the problem with this thing that they bought. I think that's something I had to learn as well, to just say, okay, just go for this solution because this is something that I won't be coming back to every year.
I think that's part of what operational maturity becomes, is that you get to the point where you're like, I know you don't want to pay for this solution, but this is what our best practice is. And not every client is our client. They can't be. I understand if I'm doing an intake and someone cringes at the rate or someone cringes at what I'm talking about for a solution, I have to make that decision for my business, which is I'm not going to install something less than simply because that's all you can afford, because ultimately it's just going to blow back on me.
Exactly. I have an example. I had a WD MyCloud. Do you know that stuff?
Nasty.
Yeah. So they already bought it. And I was there and I was like, okay, how am I going to explain this? So what they wanted all their photos on there. So I just put all my photos on there, and can you make sure that I can reach them from every device that I have? It was in the beginning of my business, so I was more likely to go with what they wanted. So that's what I did. I helped them get all the photos over, put the iPhone app on their iPhone and their iPad. I made sure that they could reach the photos, but 1.5 years later, I came back and she said, I barely even use this. I do know that all the photos are there, but I never use it because it's so slow. And I said to her, yeah, I told you. Today we're used to synced folders like Dropbox and other cloud-based synced systems. And now you're trying to work from a NAS. That's like we did that back in 2008.
Yeah, this might be an area where residential customers and small business diverges a little bit. I find with residential, I am more and more steering people to really take a close look at what Apple provides for any given sort of problem space. And you got to have a strong reason not to do iCloud Photo Library. You're going to really have to convince me for any number of reasons. You and I might not continue this relationship. I don't want to set you up to fail. If I disappear, you want to call somebody else, and we've gone down some crazy custom road, and it worked when I walked out of your place and drove away.
You want to do things according to like industry standard best practice as much as possible. And in many ways, that's going with the first party solution. That's going with something that Apple can support. And I'll often tell clients that, I want to recommend something that is not going to be foreign to somebody you might encounter at the Genius Bar at Apple. They can support it. That's a major advantage. And I think you're right, Adam, to point that out, that's maybe a consideration that we have the luxury of insisting on, or at least steering people towards in the residential market, is you can largely keep them with first-party solutions where they can actually walk into the Apple Store and say, here's what I'm doing. I've got my photos using iCloud Photo Library. I've got my contacts and calendars syncing through iCloud. Maybe they're even using iCloud Mail. They're certainly using Mac, Apple Mail .app. And these are all pieces of software that Apple can support. They're not going to be trying to like reverse engineer some custom solution that's like a one-off thing for this particular client. But yeah, going back to your example, Remy, you had a client who had the hardware, and a lot of times we're encountering this same scenario where they've walked out of, say, a Best Buy or whatever your local electronics store is, and they've been sold some solution supposedly that's going to solve this problem for them. And now that they've got the money spent, they've got the hardware in their hand, they're like, here, I want to do this, and this is my idea. I don't even know how to do that. I guess I could figure it out. And sometimes it's just a matter of like taking a step back now that you've got this perspective and experience in the business to be able to say, I don't want to just try to find a use for this hardware. Like I want to know what the goal is that you're trying to achieve.
Exactly.
And we'll give you the best way to do it.
I totally agree with what Adam says. Solutions that Apple has with all the iCloud solutions, for residentials, they are awesome in many ways. What I do have to explain many times is that they still have to back up because they say, oh, it's a backup in the cloud. Right. No, it's not.
Well, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what iCloud does and doesn't do. We have one rate, no matter who the customer is. It's one rate. We have one set of solutions. I mean, obviously, it's got to be the one that's appropriate for the particular client and application, but it's about best practices. They pay the rate and they agree to the best practices. And if they won't pay the rate or they won't agree to the best practices, then they're not a good fit for us.
There are different markets where that doesn't exactly work for different rates, but I'm like you, I have the same rates no matter if you're residential or business. But that's always been a curious factor for me to find out in different markets how that really plays a role for some consultants, because in some areas, residential rates just won't fly, or business rates rather, won't fly with residential clients. There's a big disparity in certain areas between those two different types of rates.
We're fortunate in that where we are, there's certainly a fairly good passel of high net worth clients who are running Macs and who really want a great experience and are willing and able to pay for it, and are willing to pay for the expertise that we can bring, and are willing to pay for best practices, and are willing to sort of do it right. I don't necessarily always find even that net worth correlates to the most cooperative clients either. Like, just because they have the money doesn't mean they're going to do it right and spend the money. We have many clients I've seen $5 million, $10 million homes, nickel and diming to the point where nothing works, and they're not willing to accept the fact that the reason it's not working is because they're nickel and diming.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you have clients that, are not of, significant means who, save up and budget for your high quality service because they know that they're going to, get it done right. And so, likewise, they don't necessarily have to have the, $5 million home and 10 cars and all that stuff. They may be a client like ourselves who would budget for it and save up. And the phrasing that we use, I don't know how you guys spin this, but when clients talk about the rate and they wonder about the rate and they're not sure about the rate and they're sort of like hemming and hawing, we just volunteer that we don't compete on price. We compete on value. We're going to provide a high value, and we know that. We're going to do a really good job. We're going to care. We're going to go the extra mile. The rate is a reflection of that. It's not that we've set the bar really high and we're going to try to get there. It's that we don't know how to do it any other way. We're not going to cut corners. We're not going to be getting you to the 80% and then leaving you flailing. We're going to take it 100%, and we're going to invest that extra time. And so our rate is a reflection of that.
That's a great point. And the rate is absolutely a reflection of that. But the other thing is that tens of thousands of dollars every year, taking my team to training and making sure that we have the best tools and the best training. And so what they're paying for is experience and a knowledge of how to handle what happens in that environment. And a big part of our training, for instance, if I onboard an engineer, we spend a whole day talking about what you do when you walk into a home, and what do you do when you encounter the dog, and what do do you wash your hands and make sure you show them that you're washing your hands, and how do you sit with someone at the desk with the kids flying around and the dog barking, and can you deal with that? And it's part of the hiring process. It's part of the onboarding process for an engineer. It's setting the expectation for the employee as well as for the client that we know how to work in this environment. It's not simply a quiet, hushed office. It's a very different thing going on. You have a very different set of circumstances and conditions when you walk into someone's home than when you're walking into an office. I mean, someone mentioned to me, and I had sort of never really paid attention to it, was how many clients in their multi-million-dollar homes leave us alone in their house. And their kids come home, and we just become part of their family on a certain level. And the trust, as Rami was talking about, the trust level becomes so critical to the success of that relationship. And we almost take it for granted.
Yeah, the first thing they do when you come is give you their password. That's like everything is in there.
Exactly.
I mean, and they don't even know about the keychain. So after you have their password, of course, you can find each and every password they ever had.
When you introduce a couple who can't manage passwords well to one password and you sync it across all their devices, you are their hero.
Do any of you guys have residential, clients that have house managers and assistants that you deal with instead of the direct client?
Yes, we have them. One of our sort of rules and best practices is that there's certain things that we will do with the assistant, the personal assistant. But at the end of the day, we must have FaceTime with the principal. We will not come in and be an order taker and fix the list of things that Momer left for us to fix. Because invariably, there's education that we can't do if we don't have FaceTime. If the user isn't willing, and this happens a lot with these very wealthy people, they seem to be less willing to recognize that taking a little time, they're oftentimes more resistant to learning the technology. They don't have the time. They're running around. They've got the kids. They've got all the organizations that they're part of, or even their businesses, whatever they're involved in. They're the ones who can benefit the most from sometimes 20 or 30 minutes of focused education on how to do this. And you can take something that's annoying the crap out of them for 15 minutes a day, take it out of their workflow entirely, and now they're thrilled if they're willing to commit the time.
If they leave and I have to leave their home when they are gone, that's the worst, because you can't really talk about what you did for them and how you fixed the problem and what they're going to have to do to keep it that way.
Yeah.
So leaving a house without the user in there, that's the worst. So I always try to tell them, please make sure you're here when I'm leaving because I want to tell you some stuff.
I don't necessarily need a client to sit there and watch the progress bars with me. The reality is that if you go to do a residential visit and you're going to, let's say you're going to install a new machine or you're going to upgrade their operating system, you're going to need to spend 15 or 20 minutes with them, maybe 30 minutes at the beginning of the visit to understand the scope of what they need you to do. And as we call it, pain points and wish lists. What's going on? What's not going on? What do we need to do? How can we make your experience better? Then there's all the work that goes on that they can go off and do whatever it is they're doing. At the end of that engagement, you're going to need another 15, 30, 45 minutes with them to explain what's changed, what's new. Let's make sure that everything you use works and test every bit of it from end to end, so you're not getting that call an hour later or that night saying, "Oh, Sonos stops working and I have a party tonight."
Right, or sometimes it's like related to a television or something like that. They need to know about input 2 or whatever the case is, And so they just need to like literally just be there in front of the screen with you and with the remote in hand and kind of practice it a few times. We've gotten that question where clients are just like, fix the TV. And we're like, well, the TV is not broken. You just don't know how to use it,
Right.
It's like you need to kind of be there.
And these can be very powerful personalities. I mean, they're used to running their lives. These people are powerful and they're masters of their domain. And you have to be able to politely and respectfully stand up for what you know is the right thing to do, because it's ultimately the best value for them. And they're just hurting themselves by being unavailable.
Because I had an experience recently that drove home the lessons that Andy was just sharing. I was scheduling with an assistant. I was brought in, and what I understood the job was going to be to collect iTunes music that was scattered across, various Macs and places and put it together. Show up. Immediately, 2 PCs are put in front of me with different issues and a laptop I didn't know about to deal with iCloud and this and that. And so I eventually finally start to, walk around the house and to build a list of what's where, what this music is. And I step back and I say, I don't really know what we're trying to achieve here. And I was able to have a conversation with the person on whose behalf I'd been and say, why don't we stop and let's think about how you listen to music. We do a lot of Spotify these days. I was like, okay, so before, I bill you for hours deduplicating iTunes stuff, like let's figure out. And she was really grateful. And she's like, you're right. Let's have that conversation. Let's put another date on the calendar and I'll come in and you'll ask how I listen to music and we'll figure that out.
Right.
I had an experience with a very wealthy family, and we ended up not doing the work. We were brought in by the automation and home AV integrator, and they were spending $1 million on AV and automation alone in this home. What this guy told me was that in the entire run-up to this project and through the project, he had spent exactly 20 minutes with this client on $1 million spent. And I said, how's it going? He said, well, it's been frustrating because of all the different blind alleys we've gone down and the money that's been spent in the wrong direction. They're willing to pay for it. It's been so frustrating because if we had just been able to get more time with them, so much money and so much effort would have been saved and so much frustration. The point is that they probably spent $100,000, $200,000 going down rabbit holes that didn't have to go down. Right. If they had just been more available and willing to give the integrator the time that the integrator needed to get it right first.
I'm amused at the story that you're telling, because the reason I asked this very question is because of a client where I don't get FaceTime with them, and because of working with a home automation team where it's going very far
you told
south.
A story a few weeks ago on that. I remember hearing it. Yep.
Yeah, it's ongoing. I mean, so this is just one particular client, and I won't go into all of the details, but we never see them. Even meeting to get the job a few years ago, we had to meet in a coffee shop and they wouldn't mention the family by name. Finally, when we were hired, only after signing a bunch of paperwork, we're led to who they actually were and all this stuff. And it was just and that's the hassle that we deal with. And they don't deal with us on a direct level. It is the worst experience when things go wrong, because you're left explaining things to the assistants and not to the clients themselves.
I find assistants are a mixed bag, that they're oftentimes very bright and they're very protective and very supportive of the people who they work for. Using this technology is a very personal experience. Whether you're using a computer or a phone or a remote control, it's a very personal experience. It's not simply a matter of, oh, we need a new computer setup, because how you interact with this technology is personal. And you can't see how someone's using it or misusing it or understanding it or not understanding it what questions they have. And as Ramey said, just sitting and watching someone work, you see things that they're doing that are wasting their time. And oftentimes you learn something that you didn't know before because they know it and you don't.
Yes, those questions gently, like when the windows, when they're they've got the mouse in hand, right, and then all of a sudden the windows go flying everywhere or something, and you're like, does that bother you when that happens? Yes. What is that? Can you please turn that off? And it's you just turn off hot corners, or and it's right. You never encounter something like that unless you're physically there with the person. That's why I'm fascinated with this this approach you have, Ramey, to sit with the client as kind of a matter of practice.
I always try to think of how can I make sure that they will spare like 10 minutes per day because I teach them something. And a very simple one is the F3 key. A lot of people never use it for getting your windows all neatly stacked up.
Mission control, yeah.
Mission control, exactly. And I just tell them, do you ever use this key? And I press it and they look at the screen and they say, whoa, can you do that?
My version of that is Command Tab watching people's eyes light up. How did you get that thing to come up? That palette of all the icons. It's like, what is that? Right, exactly. You showed, and you would never have the opportunity to show them that if they weren't giving you the FaceTime necessary.
And actually what you're doing at that time, it's your value is extremely high because you're giving them time every day. This is something that's going to help them every day.
It's the difference between being a technician and being a consultant. A technician can come in, or as we call engineers in my practice here, but anybody who's good can come in and install a network or install a computer. It takes really someone with a consultative approach to do what Ramey and Adam are talking about. Meet them where they are, fit the solution to them.
I think this is a good intro to getting recurring revenue from customers.
Ramey, that you hit the nail on the head there with that approach. How can you not only tolerate and maybe even enjoy working with residential clients, but then how can you have the recurring revenue part from those clients? Because that's a major component of a successful consulting practice these days. The managed services component. How did you get into the recurring revenue part?
It's true. Watchman monitoring helped me a lot. That's actually the base piece of the puzzle. The first thing you have to do, and I think that's maybe the hardest part, is to understand your customer. That's why my recipe starts with feel the pain. If I say feel the pain of your customer, is you have to understand the customer. And what a problem is with us technicians, we love working with computers. We know how they work. We know how to fix them. We know what can go wrong. We know what an ideal situation for the client is. But we can't understand that a client just doesn't understand anything of this. And they don't want to understand. They just want it to work. That's something you have to wrap your head around, is that from their perspective, the computer is just a stupid tool that has to do what they want it to do, but they don't know how to use it.
Don't you find that really varies person to person, though? There are personalities who want to understand and there are personalities who just don't.
Yeah, sure. But still, we are the guys that know. If you give a sharp knife to someone who likes cooking, or you give a sharp knife to a chef, the chef will always be the better cook. We are the ones who know the knife works. So we are going to have to make sure that we understand from the customer's perspective how they work now. What is their current workflow? And of course, there are differences. Some of them want to learn from you, and some of them, they just want to work and don't want to do anything with their computer, only when it's necessary. But still, you have to first try to understand them. If you don't understand the perspective of your customer, if you cannot look through the eyes of your customer, you will never be in a position where you can make a managed service solution that they will want to buy.
What you're talking to is empathy. For years, I've talked about being sometimes more important than the technical engineering on any project. Yeah. That so many technical engineering projects have gotten blown out of the water or have been done poorly because the social engineering wasn't on.
Well, that's what you got into a little bit earlier too, Andy, with regards to things like what we might call bedside manner. The idea of walking into a client, do you take your shoes off? Do you wash your hands? The sort of unique considerations when dealing with residential clients, that's all part of the kind of social skill aspect of, being a good consultant rather than just a, sort of generic engineer. That certainly plays into your ability to form a relationship with your client, which I think is a good sort of backbone for the recurring revenue side of things, is actually having that relationship. I think we should continue in a part 2 where we focus specifically on recurring revenue for residential clients and hash this out a little bit further. So stay tuned for part 2 next week.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century